Hello, and thanks so much for checking out the Coin Stories podcast video page. I'm Natalie Brunell, and I'm talking to the leading voices in Bitcoin about their backstories, career paths, and their philosophy on BTC. This podcast does not provide financial advice. This episode was brought to you in part by Bitcoin Magazine and the Bitcoin Conference. If you want 10% off your tickets to Bitcoin 2022 in Miami, just use the code CoinStories and the link in my description. Super excited to share my guest this week is CJ Wilson. CJ has become a big name in the Bitcoin space after retiring from his career in Major League Baseball. CJ has been a pitcher for the Los Angeles Angels and the Texas Rangers. And if you follow CJ, you also know he's super passionate about sports cars and racing. Right now, CJ is getting into Bitcoin mining and educating politicians on Bitcoin. And he also hosts his own podcast, The Throttle Dogs. Here's CJ. All right. Well, CJ, thank you so much for doing this. I'm excited to chat with you.
Here we go. We're taking it from Twitter to real life, kind of.
That's right. Well, okay. I want to start at the very beginning. I read that you were born in Newport. You're a Newport Beach kid.
Yep. I was born at Hoag Hospital in Newport Beach, as were all three of my children, which is funny because, like growing up in Huntington Beach, everyone's like, oh, you grew up in Newport Beach. I was like, I was born in Newport Beach, not quite as posh as a Newport Beach lifestyle, but so started there. And then as we went to school and all this other stuff, then eventually I got more hood as I went with Fountain Valley High School, then Santa Ana College, then Loyola Marymount, which is actually really nice. So it was that was the arc.
Well, I'll ask you about that because I'm literally looking at LMU right now as I sit. I'm looking at the chapel.
There you go.
So tell me a little bit about your upbringing, your background, your family. Like, what did your parents do? Do you have siblings?
Yeah, I have a younger brother. He is we're 18 months apart. He's a Taurus. His name, his gang sign is Thank You X, and he is an artist. He is a modern interpretive artist, and he does NFTs as well, which is somewhat strifey given what I do, but he's very talented and he's very successful now, and I'm very happy for him. We were very close growing up, and then we were fighting like cats and dogs. And then when I went away to college, then we became like good buds again. And he's married. He's got a young son. I've got a young son and two daughters that are a little bit older. Aww. And so we're both kind of going through these phases of life at the same point now, which is kind of cool. Mom was in real estate and was a degenerate day trader. She was, and my dad was super supportive of me with baseball and stuff like that. He would take me to the practices and go to the games and everything like that. Coached sort of fish out of water a little bit because my dad wasn't like a hardcore baseball guy growing up, but he really made a big effort to be supportive, and he understood that I was very serious about it. So that was kind of how it worked. But and then on top of that, my grandfather was a really sharp guy, kind of like the keystone of our family. He was a math professor, calculus professor at the Naval Academy, and was worked in the composites industry once he got out of the Navy. He is the one that really laid the foundation for me mathematically, getting me super into math, getting me to understand ratios, statistics, probability indexes and stuff like that. And when I was a kid, he taught me how to trade stocks. So I started trading stocks with his sort of formula when I was 12 years old in 7th grade with my birthday money and my lawnmower money. And that was kind of the foundation for me, where I understood the capital markets as a result of you'd have news and range trades. So I would literally make calls to my broker on like a $2,000 portfolio or whatever, but I would whole market trade my whole pile. And I traded Charles Schwab stock because it would range trade between like 20 and 30. So I would just buy low and sell high, and super unemotional, just learn how to try to shave a little bit extra bucks through the way. And I did pretty well. So that was the foundation for me as a finance bro, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was it. Lots of Legos growing up as a result of all this.
Well, no, that's really interesting. So, I mean, what was your understanding of money back then? Did you have the sense that someday you wanted to be rich?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love cars. I was like a 2 or 3 year old kid, and I was like, I want to have a shiny car, and I would read Road and Track magazine and Motor Trend. So it was very car oriented. I wanted to play with cars and be a car guy. I didn't really have a career path until I was 8 years old, at the ripe old age of 8. That's when I decided I would settle on baseball. Because I looked at the other opportunities for me to acquire a Ferrari Testarossa, and they were going to be very difficult, or things that would make me squeamish, like being a psychologist and listening to people's problems, or being a doctor and cutting people open. I was not into either one of those. I was introverted, very good at video games. I actually was in Nintendo Power Magazine multiple times for high scores, as was my mom for Tetris, which is ironic. And so taking that video game reflex and the math thing together, that's sort of how I understood the stock market, was that there are charts and things like that. There's sort of pattern recognition thing there that I picked up on. And it's still how I trade today, when I trade the markets. I think that, like, I just, as a video gamer, I have this sort of focus that allows me to stay locked in on something for extraordinary periods of time. And so I was an avid reader, studying things all the time, wanting to learn. I really, honestly, I didn't have a lot of friends growing up. I had my next door neighbor, Brian, and the kid across the street, Brett. They were my best friends. And that's it. And I played baseball, and I didn't have social groups. I didn't go to skate night. I didn't go to any of that stuff. It wasn't until I was about 19 years old that I became more social, and but it was like headphones, video games, music, playing guitar. I just want to do everything just to improve myself. And I didn't really care about what was going on outside. So in a weird way, it was actually perfect for like the day trader mentality, which is just a lot of information and just sit there and watch things happen and then react to that.
It's sort of surprising. I would have kind of thought you were like the popular jock at school, or like the prom king or something.
No, I was the kid that got in fights because people picked on me, and I watched too many Jean-Claude Van Damme movies, and I was like, let's do this. You know what I mean? So I was the small kid growing up. So like for me, I got picked on, and after this kid Logan was a real jerk to me in 5th grade, and I just had like a rage blackout and just went crazy on him. And I remember going to the principal's office, and she was like, "What's wrong with you?" I'm like, this kid picks on me every day. He kicked me in the balls. And like, if I don't, what if I can't have kids because he did damage to my testicles and all this stuff. I have 3 kids, so everything's fine. But I was like all these things, like just blurted all this stuff out. And honestly, after I kind of flipped out on this kid that was bigger than me and stuff like that, people just, I saw a reaction to that, which is, hey, if you stand up for yourself, people don't pick on you.
Yeah.
And then that sort of carried on. And then with sports, as I got better and better at sports, then that became a thing too. So as my personality sort of went into that, to say, hey, like you might not like me at school. If you're mean to me, I will be very mean to you on the baseball field. I'll hit you right in the elbow with the fastball, or I'll run you over. And I became more of a football, hockey kind of player mentality in that regard. So it was like that combat level. I wasn't big enough to beat people up, right? But I was big enough to defend myself, and I was angry enough to defend myself.
Well, that's really interesting. I want to hear a little bit more about your whole baseball career, because I think there are a lot of kids out there that dream about being a professional athlete, and it never happens for them. And so clearly you had a natural talent. Can you talk to me a little bit about your baseball life?
I was successful right away. So successful, in fact, that my first coach, George, I won't name his last name to shame him, he told me I should quit and go play soccer because I had no future in baseball and I have a lot of energy. So I was clearly not cut out to be a baseball player because I don't have hand-eye coordination and I don't know how to hit. So my dad, recognizing that I was not going to give up, actually started getting me baseball books. And so I read the baseball books. And then with my baseball card collection, I would literally look at the baseball card collection and see how the guy was standing. So, and modify my stance to stand like that particular guy. And then my swing, because baseball cards in the early 90s, because this is like 1989, 1990 now, they had this the photography was incredible. And so they had these action shots where you could see the guy's bat like this, and he'd be looking with his eyes and making contact, or the pitcher in this position or whatever. So I literally was just trying to copy major league players. And because I was determined at that point, I was like, I'm going to play in the majors and be an all-star. That was like the thing, and get a Ferrari. So I was like just saying, hey, these other guys that are doing it, they're 6 feet tall. They're like regular guys. It's not like basketball, which I was a big fan of, where you have, Magic Johnson, 6'9", Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, 7'2". I recognize that I'm not mechanically built for that because my dad is like a regular white guy. So like you look at my dad and then you look at Magic Johnson and you're like, yeah, I'm not going to be that guy. I'm not going to be able to play for the Lakers. Mm-hmm. And so when people ask me all the time, they're like, who's your team growing up? I was like, oh, the Lakers. I love the Lakers, but I didn't like have a chance to play for them. So I instantly, instead of becoming a baseball super fan of a team, I said, okay, I'm going to be a fan of players and emulate the players. So I'm going to emulate Ken Griffey Jr. or Nolan Ryan or Pedro Martinez or whatever. And these are the guys that I'm going to try to like identify with. And so for me, it was that drive more so than the natural talent, because the natural talent it wasn't natural. I was late. I didn't play baseball till I was 9. So my coach thought I was terrible because I never played T-ball. So, but by the time I was 10, it was me and a kid named Joe Harsony, and we were the 2 best players on that 10-year-old team. And then by the time I was 11, I was an all-star and hitting home runs and, stuff like that. So I caught on quick because I realized, hey, there's a formula to like the mechanics of it. And there's also a formula to the strategy of it. And so as I'm reading these books from Nolan Ryan, Wade Boggs, Tom Seaver on these, Hall of Fame level players, I'm getting Hall of Fame mental insight from people. It's like reading Jimmy Song's book, Thank God for Bitcoin. You're getting like the smartest people in the room, dumbing it down for you to, as a rookie, to like get it. And so then all of a sudden I'm a 10-year-old equipped with Major League All-Star approach. And then it was like smashing people from there, but I still was small. So I wasn't like a bruiser in the league. I just happened to figure out how to throw harder, just sort of naturally from watching these guys and being what I would say coordinated. I'm a very coordinated person. I can visually, I can learn things I have a photographic memory. So if I see something, I can do it, if that makes sense. Yeah. And just, I was willing to just have crazy repetition. So I had just crazy work ethic. It was always just the focus of, I have to play baseball, whatever happens, I have to get better today or this week or whatever.
So what was the process of actually getting drafted into the MLB? Because I saw that in addition to LMU, you went to another college too, like Santa Ana College, right? And you were just playing baseball the whole time?
Yeah. So I went to junior college because I wasn't physical enough to get a full ride or something like that to a Division I school. So this is all tied in with the economics of the situation, right? So in 1998, I graduated high school as a 17-year-old. So I wasn't really physically ready, to play Division I baseball for USC or UCLA or Stanford or something like that. I had great test scores. I got into Dartmouth and all these other places, but I knew that I didn't want to be a, college professor or an engineer. I wanted to play baseball. So, because, college is always going to be there. And so anyways, I ended up going to Santa Ana College because my mom and my dad we weren't like super well off. So I needed to get playing time, number one. And number two, we couldn't afford to just spend $30,000 a year to go to some school. It just wasn't going to happen. Right. So junior college at the time, my choices were Orange Coast College, Cypress College, or Santa Ana College. And I liked the coach at Santa Ana College the best because the 3 schools, the girls were really pretty at OCC. That's all the Newport Beach and Corona Del Mar girls and stuff like that. And then the baseball team at Cypress was very good. And like every year was a perennial state championship contender, but they were kind of like the sort of stuck up kids. They were like we're better than you kind of vibe, like the mean girls. Santa Ana was like pretty hood. And we had, more of a ethnic team and stuff like that. And, but the coach at Santa Ana said something in my visit or whatever. He said, listen, it's all about self-discipline. You want to work, you'll get ahead. He's like, I'm not going to lock you out of the field. I'm not going to lock you out of the weight room. You want to spend extra time, get better. It's up to you. He's like, it's about self-discipline. That's how you become a man. And I was like, yes, he gets it. I get to work, and like, that was it. And so, I went to Santa Ana College and then basically got a full ride after my sophomore year to go to LMU, which is a very expensive school, but I didn't have to pay for it. So I could afford it at that point. And then after my junior year, then I got drafted and then left. And then I was in the minor leagues for a couple of years, then the major leagues.
What's that process of getting drafted? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people even listening to this who dreamt one day of being a professional athlete, maybe being a baseball player. What's that whole process like? Is it super just nerve-wracking? Are there certain teams that you really wanted to play for or teams that you absolutely didn't? I mean, how does it all work?
Yeah, there's 30 teams, so you have zero control over the situation unless you specifically tell one team, I hate you guys, don't draft me. And even then, you still might get drafted by them. But it's a kind of a dumb move to do that. So after my sophomore year at Santa Ana College, I had literally won every award: state MVP, league MVP, team MVP. I was a batter and a pitcher, so I had like crazy stats on both sides, and I was a very good player. But I told all the scouts, hey, listen, I'm going to Loyola Marymount unless I get $100,000. So at the time, I didn't think that was a lot of money. I said, okay, well, that's what this college degree is worth, right? It's worth $100,000. So if you want me to go to play baseball, then you got to pay me $100,000, and then that's it. I did not get drafted, even though I had won all these awards and was all this stuff. You know, I was the sauce. So in California is like, this is the hotbed of baseball, right? This is like where people like raise kids to be baseball players. It's like the Dominican Republic and California.
Yeah.
Like that's like the two tightest zones ever. And then that was hard. You know, I thought I was going to get drafted. I didn't. And I talked to a couple scouts after the fact, and they're like, yeah, you put a price tag on yourself. You thought that you were only that good. What if we wanted to give you $200,000? And I was like, wait, what? This is like some psyop? Like, what the hell? So that's when I really started like thinking about it a little bit differently, more like a business. And then I felt like, well, I need to have a no reserve auction next year. So the next year I go to Loyola Marymount. Our team was terrible. We were 20-33. And that's only because we won the last 3 games of the season. We were like 17-33 going into the last series. So we were like the ratio of wins to losses was terrible. My statistics were really bad. I went from being able to call my own pitches and swing it whatever I wanted to the coach was like, they made you throw certain pitches, and if you didn't, they would kick you off the team or like pull you out of the game, and just like overly controlling. Like maybe let's say the way Australia is being right now, you know, with some of the authoritarianism. I didn't respond well to that, obviously. So I had what I thought was a pretty dismal season. And the scouts were like, hey, we know your pitching coach doesn't know anything, so it's totally not your fault. But you know, what do you think about signing this year? I said, whoever signs me gets me. That's it. Whoever drafts me first, like they're getting me, because I'm not going to sit here and play games. Like, I'm not coming back to this school. I will transfer if I have to, because I will not play for this coach or that coach ever again. They're terrible coaches.
Yeah.
So then all of a sudden I get drafted in the 5th round, which is like really cool, by Texas. And Texas had sent a scout to talk to me multiple times, Tim Fortuno, and Tim's son, Justin, I had played against him when we were younger. And he actually, he lived like diagonal, like my neighborhood and his neighborhood were like diagonal. So we actually played in like the same little league and stuff like that. So his dad was a major league pitcher at some point and offered me pitching lessons. This is like fucking gold right here. And he goes, hey, I could give you pitching lessons. And I'm like, Tim, don't waste your time. I'm going to be a hitter. I'm going to hit in the major leagues, because that's what I want to do. This is when I was like 13 or something like that. So obviously then Tim drafts me as a pitcher, and I was still playing center field and pitching and playing first base and pitching, doing both. And some teams were like, yeah, we like that you're an athlete. You can do both. That's great. So I was hoping to get picked by the Dodgers, because as a local guy, you know, that's like kind of the team. And then, so Texas drafts me, and I was like, whoa, 5th round. That's a lot of money. I'm going to get like a bunch of money. That's cool. And then I was like, oh shit, they want me to pitch. I don't want to pitch. I want to hit. So I was like, okay, well, they're going to have to pay me a lot now. You know what I mean? So I ended up negotiating and getting like $205,000 as a signing bonus as a 20-year-old. Right. So at that point, I had already been a day trader. I'm a car guy. So I did something pretty responsible with my money, knowing that I wasn't going to make any in the minor leagues, because you make about $1,000 or $2,000 a month when you're playing in the minor leagues. Like, fun fact, which is why they have to send you to like crazy, like podunk towns, because your rent has to literally be $200 a month.
Right.
Otherwise you're starving.
Yeah.
So I bought a condo with a buddy in Huntington Beach and debt serviced it. And, you know, debt, because my mom is a realtor. She's like, hey, this is how we do it. This is how you can like protect yourself and make money. And then I was like, man, I got about 50 grand left, like, you know, plus some like that I could just spend it. It's not going to hurt me. I'm going to get a car. I'm going to get myself a car. So I got myself a Porsche 911, a 1997 C2S, which is a wide body air cooled Porsche. It's like the nexus of perfect collectability. So I'm like 21 at this point, and when I looked for cars for like a year, and I found one in Santa Margarita, and it was like a detective that had it. So I roll up to his house, and he's got it listed for like 50 grand. I talk him down to 48, and then I gave him the money, and then that was my car. And so I'm a real hotshot dickhead at this point, because I'm like 21, 22 years old, and I have a, you know, like literally a 911 as my only car, you know. And I thought I was pretty tight at that point. In the minor leagues, you know, I'm in AA at that point. There's like, they've changed it a little bit now, but there's 6 layers. AAA is the top, then AA, then high A, then low A, and then like 2 rookie leagues. And I had gotten sent from the draft into the 2nd rookie league and moved up to the low A my first summer. And then the next summer the next year I started in high A, and then got moved up to AA. I was like, dude, I'm on the fast track. I'm going to make the big leagues like, you know, in a couple months. So this will be easy. I thought I was going to make the big leagues in 2 years. And I ended up getting hurt before I made it to the majors. And then I missed 18 months with Tommy John surgery, nerve damage. And that was really brutal for me, because that's when I really had to, that was the crash, right? I talked to Jimmy Song about this before. I said, that was really the volatility, like life thing. I'd already come through my freshman year in college. I broke my back. And then I came back from that to win the college player of the year award or whatever for California. So then I took the injury. I was like, well, I broke my back and came back. So like, this is just an elbow. I'll be fine. And you know, I think the injuries and stuff like that and the fighting spirit sort of carried me through that. And then I ended up making the major leagues in 2005 as a 24-year-old, and then bounced around a little bit, and then kind of stuck in 2006. And then I didn't go back after that.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, I wanted to touch a little bit on that, because once you've made it, right, once you're like in the major leagues and you're playing for huge teams, that must be amazing for your ego. And you must just have all this drive and probably feel like you've finally made it. But then at the same time, it's really hard on your body, right? I mean, it takes an excruciating toll. And I know you've had several injuries. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because it seems like it's like a juxtaposition of just sort of excitement, momentum, drive, and then also just a lot of physical, you know, exertion.
Yeah. So the best part of being a professional athlete is you get a result. Okay. So you try your hardest at all these other jobs, right? You could be a ballerina or a news anchor or an artist or a singer or a doctor. And like, what are your actual tangible results? Right? On American Idol, you get voted forward, and that's like a popularity contest. But in sports, it's a score, and you either win or you lose. And so, you know, hey, you get the feedback loop is very direct. I did really well. I'm improving. These are my statistics, and you can measure your success. And relatively speaking, when you come into the team, you're at the low man on the totem pole. So then the goal is to work your way up. The churn is down at the bottom, right? They keep the top players on the team. There's like 25 players on the roster, and the top 15 guys or whatever stay there pretty much the whole year. The bottom 10 guys is actually 30 guys. And they sort of cycle you through depending on if you're doing well or not. And the whole thing is you don't want to get sent back to the minors, because major league life is really cool. So you have this sort of like, don't let the bear get you mentality, like that metaphor. And you're trying to be better than all the other worst guys. Which is very much like racing in Formula One. You don't want to finish last. You want to finish 10th. It's way better because you get a point. And
are you very competitive against each other? Is there a lot of just like
it's like psychological warfare, especially in the minors, because you're nowhere and you want to get somewhere. So once you get to the majors and you sort of establish yourself, you kind of look around and you're like, okay, I like you. You're good. We can work together. Yeah. And the people, it's kind of self-selecting. Like I had a teammate who ended up getting washed out of baseball because he had too many legal problems. And he was actually deranged, without exaggeration. He had a drug problem. He married a prostitute. He cut a guy's hand off. Like the guy had serious, it was amazing. It was like a bad children's book. It just kept escalating basically. And, so it's like, don't be like that guy. Don't associate with that guy. Don't get in his mix. Don't get in his way. So, whatever. This is pre-Instagram, right? So the permissibility on people messing up was higher. But I think like it was always a challenge to select the best people. But the thing I would always do is try to find like an outfielder, because I was a pitcher, or a first baseman, and be their best friend, because then we were never in direct competition. They're a hitter, I'm a pitcher. We can be friends. We can talk about the game. We can develop. We can lift weights. We can get strong. We can eat well. We can share books, whatever. So my kind of 2001, 2002, 2003 buddies were a guy named Jason Botts, a guy named Lance Nix. The three of us were sort of the three amigos. Jason and I were from California. Lance is from Texas. We were all very into fitness, very into working out, very into getting better. We would share books. We had like a book club. We were reading The Power of Now and stuff like that when we were kids, effectively 21 years old. And so that type of self-improvement on a deep level, like that was essential, because if you're not actually ready, when the spotlight hits, it's going to catch you in all your unflattering angles, right? So you have to have everything ready, and you understand this because you're on air, so you understand how that works. And as an athlete, the other team is trying to pull you apart. They're trying to find your weakness. They're trying to see, okay, if he does this with his glove, that means he's going to throw a changeup. So they're looking for all these like psychological and physical tells, like poker. So you have to be very stoic when you're playing. You have to kind of have this box that you stay within. And for me, that was cool, because I was a introverted guy. And it helped me to have other people watching them struggle or have strengths or whatever. It's not going to say, how's Lance doing it? How's Jason doing it? All three of us ended up making the majors. Jason and I were actually signed by the same scout, ironically. And we all ended up living in the same building in Dallas at one point, like at different times. And it was kind of interesting, but we each had different personalities, different positions, different skill sets. So none of us had the same career path, in that regard. But the thing you're always fighting is injury. And I had already been through a massive back injury and a massive knee injury when I was in my teenage days. So when I got my elbow problem, I was like, well, yes, I am a pitcher. So the first thing I did was I went to the team and I said, okay, listen, I know you want me to pitch, but I can actually hit. Like, I will do a showcase, like throw me batting practice, watch me hit. I was always very confident in that. And the hitting coach at the time was a guy named Paul Carey. He's a college coach now somewhere, but he was like, I'll back you. I'll work with you. We can do this. Cause I was like, this is potentially a career ending injury. And the team was like, nah, it's not a big deal. It's just Tommy John surgery. You miss a year, you'll be fine. And so I ended up getting my surgery in Los Angeles with Louis Yoakum at the Curl and Job Clinic. And he passed away a couple of years ago. And it was interesting to me because like I came back and had an amazing career. And I mean, I think it was great. I played over 11 years in the major leagues. Yeah. And there's another guy on my minor league team that had surgery like a month after me, but a month before me, something like that. We were both left-handed pitchers, both top prospects. He never made it back. And I did. And he had surgery with the team doctor. And I told him, I said, listen, you could have surgery with anybody. We have that right that we can pick our doctor. So pick the doctor that's done 500 of these surgeries that everybody comes back from if he does it. And he's like, no, I'm going to get it done by this guy. I'm like, there's two guys you get it done from. You get it done from James Andrews or Louis Yoakum. At the time, those were the two guys you get. And he got it done from somebody different. Yeah, somebody different completely. And, I saw that as a tactical error, right? As a career tactical error. So you stay like, the question is, are you competitive with your teammates? So I was like, dude, I'm trying to help you right now. Like, let's get surgery from the same guy. Let's rehab together. Let's go through it together. And then we'll both make the major leagues. And he was like, nah, I'm cool. I'm just going to do it this way. And he's like too casual about it. And he never made it back. And this is a guy that was like bigger than me, taller than me, threw harder than me, and had better stuff in some ways. But he just was a different personality, and I think my personality was much more geared towards surviving difficult situations. Not everybody's built like that. I had been through a sort of volatile childhood. with like the divorced parents and stuff like that, and the I don't know, getting bullied and everything. So I had kind of hardened myself up. And for a lot of people, the minor leagues or the professional circuit, once you get into it the first time, that's the first time they've ever experienced adversity, because they're like just physical specimens. They're just beasts and they just cruise through. I mean, I'm like 6'1", like normal sized guy. And so if you're 6'6" and you throw 95 miles an hour, like no one gets hits off you in high school. You're kicking kids' asses all the time. You're the bully, right? So like, but like once you get to be 23, 24, and you're facing these other guys that are like men in the minors, it's like you have to outthink them. You can't just like, oh, I throw hard, because like 95 is not 105, and people can hit it. And so I think for me, like the chip on my shoulder thing really was a big deal. It was a big deal for me. And so the kids listening, if they're listening because I'm a baseball player or they want to be athletes, you have to keep your chip on your shoulder, even when you get money, even when you get praise, because if you start thinking about how good you are and you read your articles all the time about how amazing you are, it doesn't actually get you any better. And then you still have another game to play, which means that you have to fight against somebody that's your equal or maybe even better than you sometimes. And, the professionals are very good. The guys you're facing are the best in the world. So you can't let your guard down, because they will smash your ass, That's how it goes.
DJ, I want to ask you something. I don't know if you're like willing to talk about it, but I'm super curious, because one of the stories that I know our networks have covered is the Angels player Tyler Skaggs that had the overdose, and I guess it was like a staffer that was giving them the medication. And it just always made me curious, because I've heard that when you are a professional athlete, there is so much pressure, like even if you're injured, to just keep going and kind of push your body to the limit. And sometimes that means you have to, maybe get some medicine that's going to make you feel better, and you can't always get it from the right avenue. So, do you have any on that? And is that the case?
I think that's a little bit of a leap. Okay. We have really amazing doctors. Some people have alcohol problems, and some people have drug problems, and some people have addiction problems. And those aren't necessarily the same as having a pain problem. So I want to draw a very distinct. I have a very high pain tolerance, but I had 5 arm surgeries, a broken back, a partially torn ACL, stress fracture in my leg, shattered hand. I got hit in the head with a line drive. Wow. I had nerve damage. I partially tore my hamstring. I strained my oblique. What else we got? I think that covers all the quadrants. So I don't take pain medication, because it's addictive. Mm-hmm. So I'll take anti-inflammatories. I will talk to an orthopedic surgeon about maybe working some mojo together with like some pain killing, like analgesic rubs, like icy hot type stuff or whatever, but like a graduated version of that. So when I was playing, my last year pitching, I had no cartilage in my elbow. So this is as much as my arm bends. Right? That's it. So I could still throw 91, 92 miles an hour with no range of motion. That's as straight as it goes. That's as straight as my right arm goes.
Oh, no way.
See that?
Oh.
See the difference there? Straight. That's as straight as it goes. So so I have like 90 degrees of rotation in my elbow, right? This shit hurts. Like it was nonstop pain. It hurt so bad my last year, I could not even play catch in between games. I would pitch. They would drain 7 cc's of pus out of my elbow. And then 5 days later, I would pitch again. So this is the deal. This is why you get paid the big bucks. You suck it up and you take the pain and you just keep going. If you don't have the stomach for that, you won't have a long career, realistically. And you have to be lucid to play well. So people that go towards the ultra painkiller meds that have intoxicant effects, Oxycontin and stuff like that, they're going to have serious life problems as a result of that. Now, it sounds a little preachy for me to say that, but like I went through it. It's not like I didn't. I had Tommy John surgery. I didn't take pain meds. I had nerve displacement. I had all this other stuff. I don't take pain meds. The reason why, because it's addictive. Mm-hmm. And because I don't want to be a statistic. Sounds sad right now, but Tyler developed a problem. That's the reality. And he was getting non-medicine, right? Which Oxycontin is not a medicine. Really, it's an abuse. It's a drug at this point, in my opinion. And it's sad because Tyler was like my little brother, and I love the guy. When we were on the team together, he was like one of my favorite people to watch because I felt like he had such a high ceiling. I was way older than him, but his locker was next to mine because I was the veteran guy supposed to give him advice. So when it happened, I was heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken. And I'm still heartbroken for his family and stuff like that. But if you're mixing alcohol and you're mixing, medicine that is bad, that is like there's an effect there, then you're playing alchemist or chemist or whatever.
Right.
Like there's a consequence to that, right?
Right.
So the issue with the staffer that supplied the stuff, the staffer had personal problems. That's documented. And when you put someone with personal problems around people with resources, you get this sort of like weird black hole of like froth that people like me don't gravitate towards. So we don't really, I'm not gonna say I don't understand it, but like you're not aware of that, right? Because it's like, it's not your thing. It's like there's a story, one of my friends, this sounds bad, one of my friends got divorced recently because her husband was just kind of a maniac apparently. And the maniac guy had maniac friends, and they would go on maniac trips where maniac things would happen. And like people like me don't get invited on those trips because I'm like a Eagle Scout, you know what I mean? So it's not like you even know sometimes, because people that have a problem, especially a problem of abuse,
Right.
they don't come out and say, hey, but guys, by the way, I'm doing this. What do you think? Because like they've thought it through, or they have some degenerate friend that tells them to do it, and because it'll help out, and that's why they end up doing it. And with Tyler, it's it cost him his life because he was experimenting with this stuff. And painkillers are abused in professional sports, 100%. You have access to this stuff. You have money, you have doctors, you might even have a friend that's a doctor that'll write you a prescription or something like that. A lot of guys are taking a lot of shit constantly because your body hurts. Yeah. It's the bottom line. Your body is going to hurt. That's why you get paid millions of dollars, because and that's the reason why I can't watch football to this day, because I know how messed up these guys get in football, orthopedically and also mentally from CTE and things like that. So like I can't support the NFL as a result of that. Like emotionally, it's hard for me to even watch football. And people are like, oh, did you see that game? I'm like, literally, I don't ever watch football, like, because I see that as I don't know, it doesn't fit with me. Whereas with racing, even though racing is dangerous, it's a willingness, from the participants on a knowing basis that today I'm taking a chance today, right? It's way weirder as a professional athlete to take a chance today for something that might screw you up in 20 years, right? And I felt good about walking away from baseball when I did, as I retired after my year 36 season. And so I was still physically able to play, I could still run and do all the other normal stuff. I wasn't like, messed up, but I was like, you know what, if I have like another arm injury, I will have another arm injury. I just keep having them. I have no cartilage left. And at some point I'm going to rupture a nerve, and then I'm going to have like the, no ability to play catch with a kid, pick my kid up. I was thinking about things like that. I think about my quality of life overall. I was like, hey, listen, I'm not a Hall of Fame player. I wasn't good enough to do that. I wasn't good enough to get to the big leagues early enough to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish statistically. But, I had a good career, and I can retire with dignity, knowing that I have my body in one piece, and I can go participate as a parent or as a recreational athlete. I could go run a triathlon today and not like, not risk some sort of massive injury as a result. So I think it is true that it is rough on the body. It's also true that it's easy on the bank account. So you have to balance those things out. And it's like any other sport, whether it's MMA or boxing or, the NFL, these guys are all doing this on purpose because it's what they think is best for them at the time. It's their investment, right? They're investing in their future by donating their body to sports science. And, having all the injuries I had, I can confidently say that, there are people that do steroids. There are people that do human growth hormone. There are people that use painkillers. There are people that do drugs of abuse, all this stuff. it's a personality thing. If you're either one of those people or you're not, I think that's kind of the way I look at it, you know?
Well, I think this is a good place to ask you sort of about your straight edge lifestyle, because I know that you're super passionate about that. When did that start? And for people that aren't familiar with sort of what you abstain from when you're straight edge, I read it's like alcohol, drugs, all that. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's that. It's drugs and alcohol and trying not to get addicted to anything, really. So the straight edge movement kind of came from like punk rock a little bit, and I guess maybe the '80s with Minor Threat. They were like a rock group or a punk rock group that sort of sang about it. They came out with some songs about it and stuff like that. I didn't really come to straight edge through the normal channels in that regard. I came to straight edge through the fact that I had some family members on both sides of my family that had drug and alcohol problems. And so I saw that and I was like, wow, genetically, I see that it's part of me. And then the fact that I can sit there in front of the PlayStation and play for 14 straight hours on a Saturday afternoon and wake up and play until 5 a.m. if no one stops me, like that might be an addictive personality. So maybe I should just like not start, you know? And so I just never started. That was the secret. I didn't have any problems where I was addicted to something and then I had to quit, you know. I didn't have to go to AA or anything like that. I saw people that needed to go to AA, right? And then I was like, that is not going to get me to the major leagues. Like this kid dies having an overdose in middle school. I'm like, that's not going to cut it. You know, this guy goes to jail. This guy's like selling drugs, like having to carry a knife to protect his stack. I'm like, I don't want to turn out like these other kids that I'm seeing at my school and stuff like that. You know, you see movies and you're like, okay, Boys in the Hood, like people are getting shot over this stuff. So it's like, I'm not gonna indulge that. Like I need to thread this needle that the percentage of success for, you know, child to pro athlete is very thin, right? It's a very thin line. And I just stayed on that thin, narrow path my whole life. And once you get to a certain point, you realize it's the right thing because you see kids start falling off because they start partying and things like that. And it's not to say that like, oh, it's evil to do this or that or whatever. Like, honestly, like I'm a libertarian, so I don't really give a shit if someone wants to do this or that or whatever. Just don't bring it around me. But also, you know, I was always focused on personal improvement and I felt like I needed to get better, right? I didn't have it made. So I was like, you know, it was the door felt like it was always sliding down and I had to slide underneath it like Indiana Jones style. And so I just had that chip on my shoulder that was like, I can't give in. I can't do this thing. Peer pressure isn't going to get me anywhere. Like these kids aren't going to get me to the major leagues. And that was like, I think a really big part of it. So that was probably when I was 12 or 13 that I really figured it out. But for me, it was like, oh, I'm never going to drink or do drugs. And then I didn't know what straight edge was until I was in high school. So then I was like, oh, it's a thing. There's like a name for it. And then, you know, that was kind of cool. And then as I got older, all my friends that I would hang out with in the off season were straight edge people that were in like the music scene and stuff like that locally in Orange County and Los Angeles. And so I was going to like straight edge shows, like, you know, punk shows or metal shows or whatever. And I was into music, so that made sense to me. But I was the weirdo because I was the athlete and you had all these art related kids. And then I'm the straight edge athlete hanging out with straight edge musicians. So it was kind of a thing. But for a long time, that was my entire friend group was straight edge kids in Orange County. And there's about 40 or 50 of us that were sort of like one big decentralized group, like a family. And a lot of us came from broken homes and stuff like that. And that we were the support group for each other as a result. It was a consciousness thing. We realized that we didn't want to be a statistic or turn out as something bad. And moderation for people with addictive personalities doesn't really exist. So you have to take a hard stance. You have to be militant on one side just to protect yourself from yourself, you know, in that regard.
This is super fascinating. I mean, you have so many different just like elements to you, from your spirituality to your athleticism to your race car driving. I mean, there's so much to cover. So, okay, I'm going to try to segue, eventually get to Bitcoin, but when you retired, can you sort of take me back to just what was that like? Because obviously you had enough money, right? You didn't have to worry about the money. I think I read that you knew that you wanted to do something with racing. You moved to Fresno. That surprises me because I don't know why you moved to Central California. I actually almost worked in Fresno for ABC 30, but it's not the place that I would imagine someone moving to. So tell me a little bit about your journey, I guess, after baseball and your racing. And then I want to ask some Bitcoin questions.
Sure. Yeah. So, um, I had been an investor for a long time, right? So I had not necessarily succeeded with every investment. I'd had volatility kind of wipe me out on certain things, but I was very much a hard money person, and in a lot of ways, like I was a Peter Schiff fan. This is like 13 years ago. So in 2008, 2007, late 2007, I had actually pulled all my money that I had acquired at that time out of all the equity markets. So I vacated the markets because my analysis, like I said, I've been trading at that point. I was 27 years old. So there you go. So I had been trading by the time I was 27 for 15 years. Okay. So think about that. Like how crafty old man I was in the markets because, and I didn't have any money, right? It was just that I was so careful with my money. I was so stingy with my money because I wanted stuff. I wanted hard things. So I started acquiring silver and gold and stuff like that when silver was like $5 or $6 an ounce, and gold was maybe $700 or $800 an ounce or something like that. So, and the economy at that point was like running really hot, and the people were like buying second houses and third houses. I was almost going to buy a third house at that point because I had my condo in Huntington Beach. Then I had a condo in Dallas that I lived in at full time. And then I was going to buy a place in Austin as a speculative investment, right, in the W Hotel. And like, I was like, this is stupid. What am I doing? Like putting 40 grand down on this place. I'm never going to live there. And I don't know anybody there. It's just a cool city. So I'm going to find a renter and I'm never going to touch it. But then I'm going to pay all this property tax. I was like, nah, screw that. And then I was like, and my mom had gotten wiped out by the dot-com boom in 99, 2000. She had lost her ass and got really screwed on that one. And then this is a funnier story. This is actually kind of a funny story. I was engaged to get married in 2005, 2006, and my fiance's parents actually got arrested for running like a Ponzi scheme. And I was like, what the hell? So I just didn't trust anybody at this point, right? So by the time 2007 rolls around, 2008, now I'm making more money. I'm buying cars that I feel like are collectible, and I'm buying gold, I'm buying silver, and I'm like hoarding it. You know what I mean? I'm buying guns and ammo and bullets and like all this stuff that I like, fear related investments, right? Total fear chaser in terms of my investment thesis. Cause I was like, if the world goes to shit, I can grab my stuff, I can go wherever that is. It's not like I had some bug out chalet in Switzerland or something that to disappear to. I was just thinking theoretically I could take some diamonds and some gold and some stuff and I could escape if like Texas blows up or something like that, or California blows up. So, I had read all the stories about hyperinflation. I had read all the stories about this other stuff. I was an active trader in Forex and these types of markets. So I just kind of got spooked by the market. Market crashed. I was like, ha, told you. And then everybody got wiped out. And the value of my condo in Dallas just got destroyed at that point. I think I had bought it for like, let's say 500 grand. It was probably worth 350 grand at that point. So I was like, well, that's painful. Okay. But I'm living there. So whatever, I'm just continuing to pay. But my salary was going up because I was more time in baseball. So it was weird where I was at this perfect thing where I was making more money every year because I was getting more experience and working my way up the totem pole. And then the world was melting down. So I did what any Major League Baseball player would do at 28 years old in May of 2009. I bought a $300,000 Porsche Carrera GT, which I thought was a really good idea. And it turned out to be a good idea because the analysis I did on it was that, hey, this thing is trading for under MSRP. It was originally 440 grand. I bought it for 330. And I ended up selling it for like 700 one day. So or 645 or whatever. So like I bought the dip effectively, right? I bought the dip. Gold went to the moon because everybody was scared. So gold went to 17, 18, $1,900. I'm like selling the top, like selling at 1700, selling at 1800, selling at 1900, getting back to dollars. And then I'm racing at this point. I'm starting to do races and stuff. But I was so insulated from the market, right? Because of my baseball career. I was starting to earn seven figures for the first time as the market was tanking. So I had outsized gains, in terms of like my purchasing power, but it was always a hard money mentality for me. I wanted stuff. I wanted things that I could hold. And I wanted to be strategic about what I bought when I bought it. I had heard about Bitcoin in 2000, 13, maybe, in relation to the Silk Road stuff that was going on. And I liked the idea of it because it was interesting to me, but I did not invest in it because of the Silk Road thing, me being straight edge. I was like, oh, it's like weird drug dealer money. I don't want that, you know. No one had ever explained to me, because I didn't know anybody that had any Bitcoin. So no one had explained to me like the 21 million thing. I didn't know that was the thing. So fast forward a couple of years, I'm a car dealer now while I'm playing baseball. I retire because I have, you know, health problems effectively. I still could have played. I for sure would have had one more year. I for sure would have had one more arm surgery. I for sure would have ended up on the disabled list. And, you know, it would have been kind of crappy to endure that. And I had a trigger event where we had our first child in like February of my last year of my contract. And so I decided I wanted to play in California if I was going to play one more time. There was a team that I was negotiating with that had signed a player that I didn't want to play with anymore. And I decided to retire as opposed to play with that player as a teammate because I just didn't like him. And I was like, I've dealt with him before. I can't deal with him ever again. I will literally quit and just go sell cars and go race and go be a dad and make my own schedule. And that's what I was going to do with my life. And so I did that. I decided to retire and start racing and be the car dealer. And that's kind of how I ended up in Fresno, because when you are trying to buy a Porsche store, Audi store, BMW store, these types of things don't come up very often. I was a Mazda dealer at that point already, and I had the McLaren store in Scottsdale. And my Mazda stores were successful in terms of like sales volume and stuff like that, but they weren't really making a lot of money. And I knew that the passion for me was in the German cars. I just like those better.
So do you still race and where?
Yeah, I still race when I can. I mean, like the last race I did, I guess it was like last summer in Colorado. I did like a couple endurance races in like a club format, but I've raced the IMSA Porsche GT3 Cup, and I've raced in Europe in the LMP3 series, which is like prototype little spaceship cars. And let's see what else. But I still train because my goal is to go to Le Mans and win Le Mans. That's my World Series now, is to win Le Mans.
So that's cool. I mean, I'm sad I missed you at the concourse. And I don't know if I told you this, but my friend back home in Chicago owns a racing school called Team Stradale. He's from Italy. And yeah, so let's focus totally on Bitcoin now. First of all, like what made you super convicted that Bitcoin is the future? And then tell me about some of the projects you're working on, because it was super interesting to learn that you are sort of getting involved in making sure that Bitcoin's bipartisan, and obviously a lot of work to be done there.
Yeah. My conviction, honestly, like I bought into Bitcoin in 2018. That's when I got in. So I had watched Bitcoin spike and I was like, this is a scam. You guys are all going to get wrecked, because I'm a chart guy, right? So I'm seeing the chart. I'm like, this is not sustainable. And then when it spiked, spiked and slammed down to 5,000 or 6,000 or whatever, I was like, oh, this thing's going to go to zero. And it didn't. And when it didn't go to zero, I was like, how does it go from 1,000 to 20,000 to like not zero? Like it doesn't make sense, like when it slams down. So that's when I was like, oh my God, there's only 21 million of these things, digital scarcity. And then I was like, how do they enforce that? And it was like SHA-256. And I was like, oh my God, I missed it. I totally missed it. Like I could have bought this stuff at like 300 or something like that. Yeah. So that's when I thought I kind of FOMO'd in when Bitcoin was like 3 or 4 grand. I like bought like 2 Bitcoin or something like that. And I'm like, okay, now what? And honestly, then the next step was I got scammed. So then I got scammed and by this guy in Arizona. And it turned out to be this whole thing. But he basically made all these claims. And I was like, this is insane. Like, this is impossible. And I started like mentally like refuting this guy. But then he always had like all these angles and stuff. So it like came like he was like, honestly, really big Bitcoin proponent, but he was a scammer. And so then did you send him your Bitcoin or something? No, even better than that. There's a current active Secret Service investigation, so I can't comment on it, but it's a story and it's great. It'll come out one day that I was involved in getting scammed by these guys, but it was like, whatever. But the point was I started day trading at that point because I was like, all right, well, Bitcoin is 24/7. And so what I did was I gave myself $3,000 on Coinbase and I traded it and I got to like 3,500, $4,000. And I was like, okay, I'll put 5 more grand in there. So now I've got like a churn, and I kind of grew this little pile, like all this activity. And then then I was like, wait a second, I'm getting hammered in fees. This is crazy. This is stupid. So then I signed on to Binance US, and Binance US had super low fees. And I was on Binance US when there was like, I don't know, like a big day on Binance US was like $1 million of like trading for USD versus Bitcoin. And then, but their fees were so low that I started doing high frequency trades. And then all of a sudden I grew my pile up really fast because I had a formula that had worked for me since I was 12 years old, effectively, with it like combining math and, like sort of Tetris reflexes. And, then that was kind of history. Then I basically started bragging to this guy. It was before he got arrested. I was like, dude, I could trade better than you. Like you're saying all this stuff, but like, I'm actually doing it. Like, here's like gains. Those are my gains. You know what I mean? Like, and it was great. So then 2019, I got pretty heavily involved, and then he gets arrested in early 2020. Then I was like, fine, screw it. I'm going to make it all back on my own. And it was like pissed off, and it was like chip on my shoulder again. And, started really getting aggressive and doing random things to like sell cars for, to try to get more cash to buy more Bitcoin. And anyway, so 2020, I had a killer year, and I was actually trading on the market when it crashed. And at this point, I'd already gone so deep into the study of it. I'd already started listening to all these podcasts and reading all these books. And I was like, oh, well, it's, fundamentally it's limited, and that's a big deal. Fundamentally, you can't really break it. That's a big deal. Fundamentally, it's distributed, and fundamentally it's decentralized. And I knew some people that were like, at this point, I started to meet people that were like heavily involved in Bitcoin. And, like a guy that had mined Bitcoin in 2010, like I was friends with him, and he started telling me this stuff. And I started like digging into the history of like all this other stuff. And I mean, he has theories on like who Satoshi is and all this other stuff. So like one of those OG guys. And then I was like, I was all in at that point,
Wait, so what's your like average cost? And are you still selling and then buying back? Are you still trading?
Yeah, I do. I only trade on sideways action because I don't trade. There's no reason to trade on big swings in the sense that like by taking profit on big things, because then big things beget big things. So my whole trading thesis, I can be really simple about this. There's periods of whale sale and whale consolidation, and you can read Glassnode and you can go through this stuff and you can sort of acquire a familiarity with the Bitcoin on exchanges and stuff like that. So, you're reading Willy Woo or any of these other people reading their stuff, but I'm looking at it through my own lens, and I'm also watching it live. There's a psychology to like taking profit that I think a lot of people have a hard time understanding. And like there's a book that called Hyperwave Theory that discusses like basically the 2017, 2018 Bitcoin run, and other commodities over the course of time that have sort of had these things. So like they get into the sort of technical aspects of that, but trading, being a good trader is like dunking. Like you can either do it or you can't. I don't think that you can learn how to do it if you don't have the pattern recognition skills or the math skills or the emotional control skills. And it's very much like poker in that sense, where it's volatile and you can't deal with that. But I literally remember at one point, and like I had Bitcoin when Bitcoin was at 9 or 10,000, and it dumped down to like 4,000 or whatever. I'm awake because I don't sleep. So I'm watching this happen, and I'm just like, sell, rebuy, sell, rebuy, sell, rebuy. And I just kept selling and rebuying. So I ended up with like twice as much Bitcoin at the bottom that I did before the crash initiated, right? Just on, but not putting money in, just trading into it. Because literally like it went from 10,000 to 3,850, right? So going back through my logs, because I had, for tax purposes, I had to check this out. In 2020, I did 59,000 unique trades. Wow. on one exchange with no robots. So like to say I was an active, busy trader is like, definitely accurate.
Yeah. And do you know your like average cost?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
You're not gonna share it?
Well, no, but see, I have different piles because I've done different things. So like, let's say, for instance, like if you sell a car, right? Like sold a car and I bought Bitcoin with that money. Well, that pile of that was at 29 grand, right? So I had some Bitcoin at 29 grand, but I had some Bitcoin in the single digit thousands.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So like
Yeah, I don't know the average, how they
yeah,
average.
if I wanted to average it out, it's probably in the teens. You know
Okay.
what I mean? Like realistically, but as I'm still buying now, you
Yeah.
know. So like every time it approaches 30 on this recent sideways action, like on that, like I made a lot of money trading from the 30 to 36 back to 30 range because it's like that's a consolidation range. And if the thesis for Bitcoin is that it's going to go to a million, 5 million, 10 million a coin, which is what I believe, then why wouldn't I actively trade when I know it's capped at a certain level because I'm watching this happen and I'm seeing the FUD roll out. And there's this timing to the FUD, and there's this that you can tell it's manipulated, or there's effects and attempts to manipulate it. But just like Elon, I should say, just like Elon tries to pump his own stock price, you know, at certain points by coming up with positive news. The exact same thing is true of negative news for Bitcoin. Anytime there's negative pressure, China mining or whatever, I'm like, yes, time to get some cheap Bitcoin. So I look at it as an opportunity to buy all the dumps, but I don't necessarily trade. Like I only trade about 15% of my stack, if that makes sense at this point, because I see the upside as being so much better than the greed of trying to trade too much of it at a time.
So what do you say to the people out there who don't know much about Bitcoin? They still don't get it yet. And they're like, that's too expensive. It's too much now. I can't get into it. Like, how do you sell Bitcoin to those people?
Unit bias is one of the worst aspects of Bitcoin. One Bitcoin is 100 million Satoshis. When you flip that around on somebody and you say you can get 2,200 sats for $1, they're like, whoa, that sounds like a lot. And you're like, yeah. So check out this app called Fold. And if you get this thing or whatever. So onboarding people through Fold and through Lolly is actually a lot easier than onboarding them through Swan or Binance or Coinbase Pro or something like that. And the reality is that Bitcoin moves at a velocity that is too high for some people at first. You know, like it's the double Dutch jump rope, right? You can't necessarily just jump into that if you've never jumped rope before. So you have to show them how to jump rope, which is basically, can you wake up every day and spin a wheel and get free Bitcoin, like for free, like figure it out. And then can you spin that wheel after buying things on a debit card where you get Bitcoin rewards? It's like, okay, cool. And then can you shop through a portal to earn Bitcoin? And then people get to the point where they have like maybe 100,000 sats or something like that from these other enterprises. Then they're like, wait, okay, so I see this, like I have 100,000 sats, but like, how much is that? I'm like, well, if Bitcoin goes to 1 million, you will have this much money. And they're like, oh, okay. And then, you send them a little podcast. I'm big on the slow play thing. Like when I was single, I was not the hardcore press guy, right? I didn't think that was, and I think this is very much the same thing. You have a goal for the situation, right? You're trying to create an encounter, and you have to like, I don't know, you have to work your way into it. You can't just necessarily like be like, yo, what's up? And then just start like, that doesn't work in reality. Like that's a bad recipe. Okay. So if you just go right into somebody and you're like, okay, listen, Bitcoin's the future. Let me tell you why. And they're like, yeah, but it's not backed by anything. And you're like, have fun staying poor. You can't just boom, go right into that. Right. You have to give it a couple chances, but I like to think of it like an octopus. If you have answers to all the FUD, energy FUD, China FUD, government FUD, tax FUD, like scam FUD, drug user FUD, trading FUD, and then maybe, I don't know, maybe there's one, and then hardware wallets. So they are hard to understand. So if you can talk your way through all that stuff, then you have a versatile skill set and you can kind of work your way through it. But I always use real life examples when I discuss Bitcoin. So I describe the blockchain in every block as a reverse of Jenga, to say that you take the little wood blocks of Jenga and you build a solid block, but the game is won or lost when the last block gets pushed out and then the thing falls. And, like when you're assembling Jenga in reverse, it's the last thing you put in that makes the block complete, then it goes. And when I describe it that way, they're like, oh, that makes sense. And I'm like, yeah, it makes sense because that's a real world physical example you can touch with your fingers. And that's what people need, because a lot of people can't just walk into a space and see a house that's empty and understand where the light's going to come in, where the couch is going to go. But if you're good at Legos, you can do that without having to do it.
Well, I'm also a big believer that understanding Bitcoin is a lot of unlearning the things that you think you know about, let's say, the economy or our government, and really trying to understand the Fed and some of the money printing and all that's going on. So, just out of curiosity, like if you, let's say you got to have a spot for a couple minutes on like the Today Show or some really popular show that was broadcasting to just the average American, general public who probably doesn't know a lot about Bitcoin, what would you say? Like, why should you care about Bitcoin, or why do you need it?
We wear clothes because we like having privacy. Start with that, right? It's a very distinct example. A lot of people use this example of, oh, why do you need privacy, right? Why do you need to shield yourself from the view of others? Well, for the same reason I wear a shirt when I go to work, right? Not because I'm like some grotesque creature that has like devil tattoos. No, it's because I want people to see what I want them to see when I want them to see it. And Bitcoin is a financial version of that. And when there is inflation, which we can see, you go to get a number one hamburger at your favorite place locally. For me, it's In-N-Out Burger. It's now $9 for an In-N-Out number one combo. When I was younger, it was like $3.85. So like I distinctly remember those two different things and see this inflation as a trigger to say, inflation is a tax. And Bitcoin is not subject to this, realistically. And Bitcoin is a way out of that. And inflation happens because of the money supply and because of public policy. And Bitcoin is completely run by the people on the Bitcoin network, the nodes and the miners and stuff like that. So would you rather have a science outlet or be completely strapped in to the wild ride of what the government decides to do, which, by the way, we all know every couple of years completely turns upside down, right? The ant farm gets totally turned over when you get Congress to shift or the president to shift or something like that. So like opt out of that, opt into freedom money, privacy money, things like that, and write your own future. It's very few people will have one Bitcoin in the future. It's going to be too expensive. And would you rather have one of those now or not? Because 10 years from now, if you look at the path 10 years ago, like even if Bitcoin velocity of increase decays, it's still going to be the best performing asset, that's mainstream or whatever out of any other choice, because you can't buy $8 of commercial seaside real estate, but you can buy $8 of Bitcoin. And eventually, I use the potato chip example on normies. So a bag of potato chips is like one Bitcoin, right? It's contained. There's all these little pieces of it in there. If you smash those pieces, they're still potato chips. That's the same way that I describe Satoshis. You can buy them in chunks of $5 or $50 or $50,000, and they're different size chips, but effectively they're all the same thing. Unlike any other investment you can ever make, Bitcoin recombines itself into closer to one full unit the more chips you have, literally. And my 5-year-old understands that analogy to say that they all taste the same, they're just different sizes. And the goal is to not spill any. And the goal is to get as many bags of Bitcoin as possible along your journey. And then eventually you realize that there's a choice between how you would spend money if the thing that you're buying has opportunity cost. And that's the last component of it, is explaining opportunity cost, which we don't have to because people understand that.
I love it. Okay. Well, as we start to wrap up, I just want to touch on the politics, because one thing that I definitely worry about is that in our divisive culture right now, and this one party is going to kind of take dominance and say, yes, we're for Bitcoin. And just to stick it to them, the other party's going to go, no, well, then we're against it. And it's just so interesting because on both sides, obviously, we're polarized right now, but Bitcoin really aligns itself with the core values of both parties. And I think it's beautiful in its apolitical nature. And so I want to get your thoughts, because I loved some of the things you shared in our bipartisan Bitcoin panel.
Yeah, I think, like generally speaking, you can say that conservative governors and conservative lawmakers are generally more fiscally concerned, right? They're more fiscally concerned with the money we have, the money supply we have, and how we spend that money in terms of programs and things like that, right? They're focused on this sort of revenue versus deficit thing constantly. Like that's like usually their platform. So when you describe sound money, the only thing that Republicans have a real beef with is like, wait a second, like don't bad guys use Bitcoin? And everything else they sort of understand. They understand the divisibility of it because it's just like anything else. They understand the upside potential because a lot of Republicans have money, and so they're looking at it like, oh, it's like buying Amazon stock in 2001, or it's like gold or whatever. So you can kind of like compare it to other things that they've probably invested in before and explain that it's not Enron. You know what I mean? And then that basically that's 80% of them that you just put them in the box and they're good to go. On the Democratic side, I think the social concern aspect is so high because you have this one angle of the ESG sort of Green New Deal people, and I'll get to that last, but then social justice really is the layer that is the most important and the one that I'm most concerned with, because the more people that own Bitcoin, the stronger the network is, and therefore the better investment it is. The more people that are in it, the better it is, really. And it's approachable because for a lot of lower income people who maybe skew Democratic, right? The banks screw those people. Fees on their checking accounts, $20 a month, right? Western Union transfers, $20 to send money to mom in Guatemala, right? These things suck. And when you have a little bit of money or none, every $20 that you lose is a real penalty, right? A super wealthy person can pay $7 for gas and they're just like, whatever. But a poor person can't, because that's literally like a bigger percentage of their income. So that's why they get screwed. So like the lower income you have, you need to think about efficiency with your life. Like realistically, I was broke at one point, making $1,200 a month. So I can remember those days and thinking I need to be efficient. I need to eat a certain amount of food, pay as little as I can in rent, pay as little as I can for gas, carpool, do these types of things. So Bitcoin is divisible. It has no maintenance costs. There's no fees to use it. It's simple. You can use it on your smartphone. Most people have Cash App these days. It's an easy way to send money back and forth. Strike obviously is very popular as well now because of Jack Mallers and now with the Twitter integration. So explaining it that, hey, anybody can participate in this. Like, doesn't matter how rich you are, you can't break it and you can't screw it up. So then that's the social justice angle. The ESG thing is like, hey, listen, Christmas lights honestly use more electricity in America than the entire worldwide Bitcoin network. And it's like trillions of dollars are secured by Bitcoin. So like, are you really going to tell me that like commercial or residential clothing dryers, which use more than Bitcoin, and Christmas lights, which use more, and then all these, like you could come up with all these other things. So like, it's easy to explain it that way. From a policy standpoint, it's hard to explain it to any politician because they're always worried, am I going to get run out of my seat because of Bitcoin, right? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes, that people that are on the wrong side of this debate are not looking at the fact that there's 40 million Bitcoiners in America. Eventually there'll be 80 million. Eventually there'll be 200 million. And once we get to that point that there's 80 million people using Bitcoin and you're anti-Bitcoin, you will not win re-election. That's the reality, right? And there's enough people there that see this as Roe versus Wade level importance, which is to say that it's potentially like world government changing human rights type stuff. And if you get to that level of, consolidated finance for individual people, then the people take the power back. And then, or they do what I've done. They just get to the point where they're like, you know what, I'm just going to get involved. Like, I never thought I would actually do this. I mean, I did have it on my list, but I didn't think I'd get involved in it this young, to get involved in politics and try to like meet these people and talk to them and things like that. But I think, I believe in America, obviously, like, I know your background a little bit. There's an importance to having America being a solid, stable nation and having a sort of moral high ground against countries like China and stuff like that have practices some weird stuff and some bad stuff. So when you see politicians come out and say, oh, we should do what China does, it's like, yo, smart guy. Like, what are we doing over here? Like, what's he saying? Why would he say that? Like, you can't say that. And so when you see people say that, then it's clearly they're being deranged. or if they're being bought by some other interest or something like that. And that's I think the integrity that Bitcoin brings to the table in terms of just the fact that you can't manipulate it.
Would you ever run?
Oh yeah.
You would
Yeah,
run?
absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't say I want to, but it's like, that's the whole point. I don't really care about being famous. I did the most famous thing I can ever do. I did a Head and Shoulders commercial on national television. Like that's going to be the bigger deal that, than anything I ever do. But if I get to the level of success that I want to get to in business or in Bitcoin or whatever, then I don't really have any more games to play. I can retire, like really retire from business at that point, and then just focus on, okay, maybe I need to give back in a sort of, in the same tradition as like Greek, the Greek democracy, where the senators had to sort of achieve something, then they sort of like opted out, then they tried to rule, and that's what I would do there.
Well, let me ask you something, and this is where I'll sort of end the conversation. You have, all the money in the world to just stop working. You obviously have this calling to spread the mission or the word of Bitcoin, the gospel of Bitcoin. I mean, why is that? You could just be driving your fancy cars. You could be, raising your daughters. But right now you just are getting so involved, and you're going to be a minor and, potentially in politics. Like, why do you care about this so much? And why do you want this to be part of your journey?
The world needs Bitcoin to sort of cleanse the sins of this fiat printing that we've been experiencing the last 50 years or whatever. And, we have nuclear weapons. We have nuclear power. We're going to be a species that takes to the stars at some point or whatever. We need to set the rules a little bit better so that power is not getting abused. And I think you need to have good people running. Otherwise, you're going to have continued corruption at various levels. We see it in some countries that they just literally can't get off the ground because it's corruption after corruption after corruption. And I think America sort of dodged a lot of those bullets. We've had corrupt people. We've had people do corrupt things. But I don't think you can really look at America in the world stage and say, oh, America's like the most corrupt country. Like, no. Like, have we thrown a president in jail for like embezzling like $100 million? Like, no. But they've done that in other countries because that's literally happened, right? So that's where I think, America still has a chance to be like a great republic in that regard. And, I want to see science evolve more and things like that. And I think that's only going to come from, a sound money system, and privatization of certain things, because people that are privatized, they have a more direct incentive to be successful, because it's like, you lose, like you're done, like you go bankrupt, and like that's a bad outcome. And I was on the phone with somebody today, and I said, listen, like if I do it your way and it fails and I end up like losing everything and like have to go to Hawaii to be a baseball instructor at a high school, like that's not the outcome that I want. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to risk all this stuff. And I believe in sound money and savings and long-term, like long-term thinking. And that's to me like what a country should be about. And when the country is not about that, then the country encounters problems. And I think when you let like one really angry person in a mob tell the mob what to do, then that's how you get in trouble. And I think that's where we're at politically right now. We have a couple extremist people that are in power or yelling at the people in power, and they're like bending to those voices, and they're taking logic completely out of the equation, and they're taking long-term thinking out of the equation. Because for a lot, I mean, it's the Cantillon effect. When you're very close to the money printer, then you tend to compromise your stuff. Sorry, I'm like turning a light on because it's like getting dark in my office now, because I didn't turn the lights on in here before I came in. But like, let me tell you a scary story. So the if we have a sounder money, NASA is better off, the environment's better off, schools are better off, all those things, because you push people to evolve. And if you push people to evolve, they will, because that's what humanity's done for, thousands of years. We went from throwing rocks at each other to, planting flags on the moon, right? But since we went to space and all this other stuff, and we haven't done anything special. Like, there's been nothing special has come out of any science in the physical sense since probably, the SR-71 program, and like the Large Hadron Collider and stuff like this. This is like a pipe dream. It's a waste of money. They should be focusing on like, how to drive spaceships deeper into space faster, and focus on that. That's my opinion, right? I think subatomic physics is kind of circle jerk. And, I think that we should be focusing on biochemistry, obviously look at the COVID thing, and medicine and life extension. And that's what's going to get us somewhere in the future as a species, So that's what I believe. I'm kind of a crackpot physics person, but that's what I say.
All right. Well, since it's getting dark over there, last question, price prediction, December 31st, 2021.
122,000.
Really? Wow. That's very bullish.
I'm pretty bullish. I mean, not as bullish as some people. I'm not frivolously bullish, but like I was charting earlier today, and I feel like we have a swing axis, which is a term that I say, like, basically there's this sort of like atmospheric effect that once you get enough kind of churn, then like it could go vertical. And last year from October 1st, we were at 14,000, and December 31st last year, we were at like 21,000, something like that. So you could see a 50% rip. And so if we get to or more, okay, because with Bitcoin, the bigger it is, the more people are going to start to pile into it, because the FOMO is way gnarlier. And I think people have seen Bitcoin go up so much, but this is a warning to everybody. Unless you're just going to buy it and hold it, there is a chance that it will go down from whatever top it makes between now and March next year. That's the reality, right? So it could go to 125, 145, 200. It could also pop 40% down from there and then end up back at 80 or 120 or whatever. But that would be hilarious. Imagine the headline: Bitcoin crashes to 80,000. I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with that. I'll be fine. I'll be like popcorn, soda in my seat, watching the movie, like, whoa, but I think there is something to be said about that. But with companies like Unchained Capital out there that you can like basically take loans against your Bitcoin, you don't have to sell. I think it's kind of lame to be a trader now, to be honest with you. I've missed out. I've probably traded against myself better than I've traded for myself, given the price action in the last 24 months.